Welcome to the Behaviour Speak podcast. Now, here's your host, Ben Ryman.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Behaviour Speak podcast. I'm especially honored today. This is my first interview overseas, and very great pleasure to have Maleshwane Mauco here from Botswana, who may be the first BCBA in Africa, which is pretty amazing. So thanks for being on the show, Maleshwane. So awesome. So getting right into it, maybe you can tell us, we're talking before, and it sounds like your journey in the ABA field has brought you to a lot of different places, including North America. So maybe just tell us kind of how you got into the ABA field, why you got into the ABA field, and kind of tell us about your journey around the world.
Awesome. Okay. I first started in undergrad there. I was at Northeastern University in Boston, and there was I saw an ad on the postboard, in the psychology department for, assistant behavior analyst training. I thought, oh, that's great. That's interesting. So I went for the talk, and I found it quite interesting because it was very evidence-based. And I thought, yeah, well, that is most probably going to be easier to do when I got back home to Botswana, because even back then I had planned on coming back home, and went for the talk, and then started working with one child, and just like everybody else, fell in love with the little girl when she first said hi to me after months and months. And then I started my journey, and eventually, I came back after I finished my undergraduate and realized, and then did a bit of research to see what was available for people with disabilities, developmental disabilities, and realized that there was nobody who was actually helping that children in Botswana, like individuals with autism and developmental disabilities in Botswana. And before that, I had been doing, whenever I came home for the summer, for the US summer, I would do a internship at the UNICEF, and I was helping out this guy who's now our president, just doing, whatever needed to be written down, I would be writing that out. And then I decided I was going to go back home, got a scholarship from Botswana, went back to the US, Northeastern University, and did my master's in ABA.
So sorry. So you were working for UNICEF, and you're working with a guy that's now the president of Botswana?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that. That's awesome. Okay. All right. Keep going. Cool.
Yeah. I was volunteering there. I didn't like sitting and doing idle and doing nothing.
Yeah.
So I would go there to volunteer, and he's now the president of the country.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. So I did my master's through Northeastern University. The program was run by the May Institute and New England Center for Children. It was a bit of a very intensive program at the time, because it was we were dealing with a lot of high support needs, complex needs kids with a lot of behavioral problems, challenges, should I put it. And then from Boston, I did a stint in New York, where I worked in Brooklyn in a very privileged, like a private Hasidic Jewish school. I think there was about 30 students. Yeah. It was an eclectic approach, and I got to go to a conference with Dr. Greenspan, and I was sitting there thinking, he's talking about incidental teaching the whole time he was talking about, how to do that, how to run the floor time session. And later I got to listen to Dr. Greenspan and Dr. Skinner. And there's a recording of them talking somewhere, but I got to listen to it. And from there, I moved to Ireland because I really wanted to come back to Botswana and being ready to actually come in, because I wouldn't have any supervisors. I wouldn't have anybody who would help me out. Here you're on your own, and you end up sometimes having to do a lot of research in terms of like the clients that you see. So I wanted a nice background so that when I came back to Botswana, I would have all of that experience. So I went to Ireland. And in Ireland, it was amazing. It was really great because it was a different culture. So to start off with, I had to tone down how I did my reinforcing in the US. We're like, good job. There it's like, very calm. Good job. It's
Oh, really? A really calm social praise.
it's very calm social
Mm-hmm.
phase. So it was really, really amazing to be able to be in that environment and also to learn, because it was a nonprofit that was started by a whole group of parents. So they got some government funding. And now I think it's fully government funded with a little bit of private donations. But I got to be able to liaise with people in government. The speech therapists will come in, and sometimes some of the government officials would come in, and I was able to learn just the systems that made a healthcare system within a country run. So it was a very interesting experience. And living in a different country, it was weird coming from the US to there, because in my mind, I was still in the US and some of the issues and how, like, in language and everything, and little things like not taking offense of people saying certain words in Ireland was something quite interesting, because there was some of the older gentlemen would say the girl who is, the girl.
Right.
The colored girl.
The colored girl. Oh, wow. Okay.
Girl. Well, we say it here too for somebody who's biracial. It's you say the colored in Southern Africa. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but coming straight from the US, it was interesting.
Right.
So it was great. I was a supervisor, and then I became the director, the interim director of the clinic where I was.
Awesome.
And then I realized, coming back to Botswana, I wanted to get more experience in terms of private and government, working more by myself as a consultant, just in case I needed to work by myself and I couldn't get a job. So I moved to Dubai. And
wow.
I was continent hopping.
Yeah, totally.
In Dubai, it was it was high paced. It was parents who were very demanding, because they were paying a lot of money, and most of them were very rich. So, and it's parents from all over the world, with different belief structures and different prejudices. So it was very interesting to navigate that. You had one parent, you'd have a parent who had a butler and, two maids, one two nannies. One nanny would take care of the child during the day and one nanny in the evening. And something as simple in the US or in Canada as training a nanny, you had to be very conscious of how you trained the nanny. Because if a child is crying, for instance, and the function of the behavior is tangible, then it would almost be punishing the nanny to tell the nanny to put the child on extinction. Because if the parents found out the nanny wasn't right there, taking care of the child and making sure that they didn't cry, the nanny might lose their job. And the parent involvement wasn't as intensive as in other places. It was mostly train the nanny, you fix it, and that was it, So it took quite a bit to be able to get a parent to be more involved in the therapy of the child.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was mostly the nanny doing the work.
It was mostly the nanny doing the work. Yeah. So it was that cultural thing where you had to be conscious of how you were training the nanny to make sure that she didn't lose a livelihood. Yeah. Or in some cases get hurt, but we're not going to go there,
So there were some strategies, that you might have taught a parent, but you couldn't teach those strategies to a nanny, because if the nanny used those strategies, then she might lose her job.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and get deported, So.
Oh my gosh.
It was that kind of that kind of a extra responsibility that you had to have. You had to be very flexible in not flexible per se, but you had to be very conscious of how you did your programming in terms of the behavior management. If there was running any extinction programming. This is way back then. You would have to do it within a session and then have the nanny come in so that they can then have some instructional control so that once they go home, hopefully that generalizes to the home situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And there was, you were telling me when we were talking before that you actually had to like write a task analysis on calling for a butler.
Yeah. A task analysis on, calling for a driver or a butler. Because like some of the things that, we take for granted that, you need to be able to learn how to drive. Even some adults there might not necessarily know how to drive.
Right.
So they would have a driver. So, a butler to go get Coca-Cola from the fridge downstairs or whatever it is that the child needed. So that's a completely different lifestyle from our regular lifestyle where you do everything for yourself. So you need to be able to look at the family's lifestyle and see, obviously you taught the child to be able to go and get their own Coke. But if it was an expectation within the home situation that the butler gets that.
Right.
You have to be culturally sensitive to that it is somebody's job, it is somebody's how they live. So it was constantly being able to remove yourself from the situation and thinking like, this child needs to learn how to do these things, but there's also a different way of learning, a different way of living, and I need to respect their way of living, however hard it is. But it is socially significant to teach a child to call the butler.
Sure.
Because within that culture, that is what you do. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, wow. So we're talking, you've done your your functional assessment or whatever, and you've determined the function of the behavior is, say tangible. Mm-hmm. And so the functional communication response is call a butler.
Yeah.
Which I think is just awesome. I would love to get Greg Hanley to do the Dubai version of the PFA, and instead of the My Way program, it's the Call a Butler program. Oh, that'd be wicked.
My way is to call a butler, and the butler will know what I need. You call the butler, right. And then you can then say, whatever it is that you want,
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Not meaning that like every single family there was like that, but there were those families who were that way.
Sure.
And from Dubai, from that kind of affluence, I went to South Africa to work in Cape Town. And in Cape Town, it was the polarity there. It was a family that could afford, not butler level, but, that had maids and, nannies and lived in a very affluent neighborhood, beachfront. And then there was a family that lived in a one-room shack with 4 or 5 people with a child with autism.
Wow.
So just as a person, it was I had to be very culturally flexible. Like I just created that today word, culturally flexible, in that I had to be able to code switch from dealing with one family to another family, one family that was quite privileged and the other family that was not so privileged. And the sad thing in that situation was the people who first got there and were quite heard in the kind of sort of ABA field were people who had gone to the UK for a month or 2 months, learned discrete trial training, Lover's discrete trial training, went back to, Cape Town, and they practiced, and they were practicing ABA, and that ABA was they said they practiced ABA, but it was more of a holistic approach. So they would have sensory integration, ABA, and they would suggest to these families who are coming from where they actually didn't have anything to eat and tell them that the kids had to be on a gluten-free, casein-free diet.
Sorry, so you're saying Dan doctors?
Yeah, they followed the Dan doctor.
And that's the abbreviation for Defeat Autism Now, is that right?
Yes, that is, yeah.
And so these are doctors that are recommending, I see some of these, the gluten casein free and all those sorts of things. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really, for me, it outlined the need for accreditation. Why there was a need for accreditation, because there's a lot of backlash in South Africa about ABA, and it stems from people who practiced ABA but were not accredited and were not certified in any way. You'd have children who would go to these services and pay $3,000 a month. The parents would mortgage their houses, change their whole lifestyle in order to access these services. And the services were, some of them were pretty horrendous. There was, I don't know if I can say it, like they would enemas with bleach.
Yep.
Okay, I can say that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's like the mineral spirit type
enemas, yeah.
As a treatment, like a bleach enema as a treatment for autism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember hearing about those in a few different countries. So wow, and so they were actively doing those.
They were actively doing those, and there was a huge when more people found out. Thankfully, they stopped them. But it's something that people were just taking advantage of parents with children with developmental disabilities and autism.
Mm-hmm.
It was that where parents were just trying to get the best that they could for their kids. So it was about teaching the parents about evidence-based practices, teaching them about how they can empower themselves and learn more about the science of ABA or whatever it is that actually works and has evidence to back it. So those people who are providing those services created this environment where people now doubt ABA throughout South Africa. And I think Namibia. Yeah. So South Africa was very interesting in that it further opened my eyes into understanding the situation in Africa and why there was a need for government policies to be developed to make sure that ABA services were taken seriously and taken into the government structures, and it was regulated. From there, I moved to Kuwait.
To Kuwait?
Yes.
And so why did you go to Kuwait?
I felt that I just needed a bit more experience. I think it was just a shock. I'm African. I'm Botswana. I was born in Botswana, raised in Botswana, and then at 18, I moved to the U.S. I think in that 9 to 10 years that I lived in the U.S., I kind of lost my... I wasn't as tuned in to the hard realities of Africa. And I grew up in the city in Botswana, and Botswana is it's a middle-income country where we do have a hardship, but it's not as, I'm going to say, poor as other parts of Africa. And I think that was a shock also to my system. So going to Kuwait was my way of going to because it was a really great clinic there that was had great supervision from an organization from the US. So it was also nice to get it back in touch with peers, being a group of people who are professionals again. And also I realized that I needed more experience within the field, and I wanted to get certified to get my BCBA. So I moved to Kuwait, and Kuwait was very interesting. Kuwaitis are really amazing, just really great people. But you do have some of you just very culturally blurring things, like having to walk into a client's home and you get a pat down.
A pat down.
because the person might be quite high profile and it's a security check, so they pat you down.
Okay.
That kind of a thing. So it was quite interesting to be able, as a clinician, to walk into a house and have to be searched for weapons.
Yeah. Usually
we search our clients for things that they could hurt us with instead of, And I think there I realized, because a lot of people were going on to online programs, like online ABA programs. I know I might get pushback on this one, but I realized that sometimes some of the programs aren't as rigorous as they should be.
Sure.
Which I think the BCBA has done a really great job now of trying to fix some of those glitches that people, there was a huge difference between somebody who went to a brick and mortar and an online program. Nowadays, depending on the program, you can't tell the difference. But back then you could kind of tell the difference because it was online, it wasn't as rigorous, and the supervision wasn't as much. So you could kind of tell the difference between that, of people who had gone through online program. And now I think there's a lot more CEUs, there's a lot more content online. The programming has changed quite a bit. But it was interesting to see that side of our field, that we are a growing profession and we are looking into improving ourselves. And one of the biggest thing was, I think it was where I realized that I think sometimes as BCBAs, we go into a situation and sometimes it's a little bit more we dictate. It's like the white coat effect, which is very, very alive in a lot of the countries outside of the West, where parents, if you're the professional parents, whatever you say goes. Parents would want for their own language to be used, but there was very few of us who did speak Arabic. So they ended up having to teach their kids English, which is a problem when they go home. Their grandparents are speaking to them in Arabic, Coming, like, I speak Setswana and English, and some jokes don't translate very well, or certain expressions don't translate very well. So I think a lot of our parents felt that, like, here are these people coming in from the US, which the company was a US company, and they're trying to indoctrinate our children and teach them their ways. So there was a little bit, even in Dubai, there was a little bit of that pushback of, oh, these people are trying to indoctrinate our kids in their ways and in their language. And, people felt that little bit of suspicion. So recruitment of more therapists in ABA was, we started that recruitment of more people with experience in ABA that spoke Arabic, make sure that their needs were represented, that their culture was taken into consideration, and that we weren't teaching the children something that is, for us might be as normal as a boy stands up to pee.
If you're planning on collecting continuing education credits for this episode, you'll need to know the 3 secret words. The first secret word is butler.
I can remember one parent when I first got there and I was doing toilet training saying, "We're not animals. We don't stand up and pee." And I'm sorry. And to me, it had never occurred to me that, but it's, according to her religion, you sit down when you pee. Everything that happens in the bathroom is done sitting or squatting, which gives, when you write your task analysis, you have to be very careful about, how you do that. You need to be able to talk to the parents and kind of you pass them through it so that they can improve it. Even like when you do a task analysis, sometimes when you're in the West, you take it for granted that, the person sits down and they stand up and,
You don't need an expert opinion on how to use the toilet because everyone sort of does it the same way in North America.
Yeah. So in other countries, it's done differently. And it's sort of like, and from there I came to Botswana, and it's same thing in Botswana. Toilet training. You do toilet training. It could be in your standard Western toilet, flushable toilet, or in a pit latrine. Yeah, in the summer and it's hot.
Right.
Yeah. And that's completely different because in the pit latrine, you follow the regular schedule, but usually there's no flushing. Instead of toilet paper, there might be a newspaper, depending on the needs of the family. So you have to kind of learn how different people go to the bathroom.
Wow, yeah. So there's a lot of cultural differences from place to place, even in just a simple task of using the washroom. Wow.
Yeah. It's almost as if, you could almost write a book about toilet training across cultures.
Yeah, toilet training around the world. That'd be an amazing book.
It would. It really would. So coming back to Botswana, there was that. And there was also, moving from writing a Pascanata TA for calling a butler to writing a TA for herding goats.
Okay, tell me more about this. Herding goats.
I have lots of pictures with the little kid, like the little baby goat kids. Yeah, but I was consulting for an institution that had an organization that had about 7 years old to technically to about 18, but not really, to a lot older. There's a 45-year-old there.
Okay.
And it was individuals with disabilities.
Yep.
And living with disabilities. They have a work transitioning program, transition to adulthood program. And one of the learners wanted to get, in Botswana, you can get grants for different businesses. You could go get a grant to get goats, and you can have your little, goat farm and head goats and sell them and get milk and all of that good stuff.
Okay.
So one of the students wanted to do that when they left school. So I literally had to learn. The parents called me and asked me to help them with teaching their child to be able to take care of their goats. So I had to write a task analysis on, in the morning, wake up. I had to go spend the whole day there, get there at 5 a.m, see how the day goes, and write a schedule for the day of what they needed to do, which is get up, make their breakfast and bath, and then go and let the goats out, and then, follow them out, just make sure that they made sure that the goats were okay. The goats roam the village a bit, and in the evening go out and get the goats to go back into the kraal.
That's awesome.
So I got to play with goats. We have a really great area.
That's so cool.
It really was. I loved it. So it was things like that. But some of the really amazing things, though, in working in Botswana was the place where I consulted. It's a camp here. They are across the world, and the government had a project for children with autism who are diagnosed with autism. Pilot project to see how they could best meet their needs. And I got there and I had to train people from those who had minimal, if no education, formal education. So some could write, but some could make a mark on a piece of paper.
Oh, wow. So not even reading skills per se.
Yeah. The really amazing thing about them is that their memory skills made up for their lack of being able to read and write. So they could store a lot of information better than you and I think, to some extent, because they could remember every single thing that I would have said the day before,
Ah, cool.
Yeah, so they overcompensated for that with just being very good at memorizing things.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, so it was really great, and I quickly had to go back and improve my Setswana, which is, I'm from Botswana, we speak Setswana. I hadn't been that fluent in Setswana when I went to the US, so I had to buy a dictionary all over again. I had to reach out to some other professionals, clinical psychologists and speech therapists, and the only speech therapist in Botswana, who happens to be my cousin. She was a therapist in government Ministry of Education. Now there's two.
Oh my gosh.
Population of 2 million, yeah. But it was great. I had to reach out to her in terms of talking to her about I cannot do a whole training in Setswana, and I have to now be able to do a whole training in Setswana. So there are these words that I need to translate into Setswana.
I see. And so you needed people that kind of knew some of the technical language.
A little bit, knew the technical language. She might have not understood it from a behavior perspective. I had to explain it to her from a behavioral perspective, and then she would then find the word that was closest to its meaning in Setswana. Yeah. So it was reaching out to collaborate with other professionals who are in the healthcare, professions too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still that whole concept of constantly being aware and conscious of making sure that within your practice you are doing, it's just what's the word for it? Integrity. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
work that you're doing meets the best quality, and that you collaborate with other people in other fields, because I'm thrown into Campale. There's no speech therapist, there's no occupational therapist, there's no physical therapist. So, but they come to me for everything. So it's about taking a step back, because sometimes it's like, oh, I can write a task analysis for getting that child to be able to, start to walk, but is there something more to them, not being able to walk, and do I need to go out there and look for a physical therapist kind of, collaborate with, and then do, provide the service in a way that I'm collaborating with another professional who is specializing in that particular area. When you're thrown into a country where there's very little services, sometimes you have to be very, very careful about not going past your scope. That I'm a behavior analyst and this is what I'm trained for. This is a speech, issue, and this is a physical therapy issue, this is an OT issue. Yeah, so it was learning to really, realize that collaboration within a field is extremely important. Sorry?
I was just gonna say, especially when the consumers are thinking that you're the expert on everything.
Yes.
And not just ABA, and so you've got to be able to, you've still got to provide that service, but in order to do that, you got to collaborate with folks from around the country. Yeah.
Yes, because they will call you doctor. They call me Dr. Mauco, and I'm like, I'm not. It's just please just call me Shwani, because so it's constantly correcting people. No, not yet, Miss Shwani. So it's about making sure you just stay within your scope and sequence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one thing I realized about, even in Botswana, Kuwait, Dubai, Ireland, US, wherever I was working, I think I said this to you earlier on. All the parents might be different. One parent might have a lot of money, and then another parent might not have that much money. But the one thing that is in common with all these parents and all these different places I worked in is that they all just wanted the best for their kids. Mm-hmm. That is a theme. That's why they came for the services,
Right. That's awesome.
And one other thing that I got to kind of think a lot about was the need. I know that the BCBA is kind of trying to stop monitoring ABA across the world. It is it's a huge undertaking that they took up. Mm-hmm. But I think one thing that they can do is to literally create a board or a committee that helps people get ABA certified in different countries.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And have they done that, or?
I think they've done that in the UK and Australia and a few countries, but it hasn't been. I think it's up to us who are BCBAs in different countries to reach out, because I'm in the process of reaching out and asking them to help to certify Botswana to certify ABA as a health profession. In South Africa and Southern Africa, ABA, early intervention services are not recognized as a medical necessity by health insurance companies.
Okay.
Yeah, they say if it's developmental, then they don't cover it. It has to be a medical issue.
Oh, I see. So your goal then is to basically have the BACB help you, or hopefully help you develop a Botswana kind of national accreditation in ABA, but as a health profession, so that maybe insurance companies will recognize it?
Yes, insurance companies will recognize it, but also if it's recognized that the government can actually sponsor more people in Botswana for ABA, and that the service, there's a certain level of the quality of service of ABA can be somehow regulated by law. because once it's recognized by the Botswana health professions, then it is like any other medical profession.
Gotcha. And so there is potential for because Botswana does, as you said, does have is a little more not rich isn't the right word, but there is more money in Botswana than maybe other countries, and so maybe there'll be some potential government funding for ABA through this.
Yes, we have free healthcare.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in the US and I had cancer, I'm coming back to Botswana.
Gotcha. So it's like Canada. It's like Canada for that. So because we have the free healthcare as well. Yeah.
Exactly like Canada, And if there's more training in ABA and is recognized as a health profession, then that means that the government will then have to provide ABA services for people, for children, for individuals in Botswana. Then there will be a need to train more professionals. And the way that ABA is structured with, RBTs, assistant behavior analyst, is perfect because we have a lot of people who hold degrees in psychology and special education who don't have jobs. If you have a degree in psychology, you can't get a job unless you have a master's,
Yeah.
We have plenty of those young people who might need a bridging course to a different profession if it's something that they're interested in. So for me, getting more people certified in ABA in Botswana is something that I'm working towards. But it's become a bit more difficult because of the BCBA not certifying. So I think in every single country that I've worked in before this, the only country, Ireland, I think Ireland and Dubai are working towards certification and standardization of ABA. Dubai, I think, is a lot closer than, is one of the most closest ones because I think the healthcare city, that's where they certified a lot of their health professionals, is now looking at like you can't practice ABA without being a BCBA.
Right.
So they're a lot further on in terms of that. So it's something that we need to be looking at. Another really great thing in Botswana is that if you're a healthcare professional, when you come back to Botswana, let's say, for me, I was in the US and I came back to Botswana. So in Botswana, because ABA kind of sort of doesn't fall in education, but falls closer to psychology, I'm a certified clinical psychologist.
Oh, you are? Okay.
I did ABA, but I'm a certified clinical psychologist.
In Botswana, you're recognized as that, yeah.
Because if you have educational psychology or you have industrial psychology, the only certification that regulation is clinical psychology. So they just put all of us in there,
Right.
There's certain things that I can't do as I can't do, diagnostic testing. I can't do any of that stuff because it doesn't fall within our scope. But in Botswana, technically, because I'm a clinical psychologist, I could do that if I wasn't, looking at my, what I can do as a professional,
So even though maybe a diagnostic assessment isn't in your kind of scope, Botswana would still let you do autism diagnoses. Yeah. Because they don't know the difference.
Because they don't know the difference. Everybody's a clinical psychologist. Right. If you've done your master's in anything psychology related, you're a clinical psychologist. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there people doing diagnostic services in Botswana?
Botswana, we're low resourced. Back in the 90s, a lot of people my age the late 90s, were sent to the US with scholarships to the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, a little bit of New Zealand to go and study and then possibly come back to Botswana to practice. A lot of them, I think at the time in the US Embassy had it at 97% of Botswana came back.
Okay.
But then, it's very frustrating to come back after you've seen things. It's nice and easy to practice, and trust me, it's nice and easy to practice in the UK and in the US and in Canada. Coming back here, there's it's the road never traveled. You have to, you pretty much are the founder of whatever career. Most of us back then were the founders of our careers.
Wow.
Some people went back.
Yeah.
So we do have some people who, like myself, who came back and we were staying and practicing. And then you do have people who went back. So like I was saying earlier on, there's only 2 speech therapists in the Ministry of Education. There's 1 occupational therapist, and she's not even practicing because she's at a director level. I think there's 6 or so educational psychologists in the whole ministry.
Wow. And this is 2 million, a population, what, 2 million you said, Botswana? Or?
Yeah. There are those who are private. There's quite a few private therapists, but private means out-of-pocket pay.
Right.
Yeah, and out-of-pocket pay is not affordable to your regular Botswana. So it's almost as if, like, in order to function as a BCBA within certain situations, such in certain countries outside of a more developed country. Developed meaning a lot of the systems are already in place. They might not be perfect, but they're already in place. Here, it's almost as if you need training on cultural humility or cultural sensitivity, where you understand and are aware of the culture of the people, and you're able to code switch and be able to know and have empathy for the people that you're working with and know what their needs are. We need training in that. And we also need training in, we need some level of training in policy development and understanding policies and systems.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that sort of bureaucratic stuff you got to be able to do too.
Yeah. Which I think in the US, there's trainings on, billing. You have the CEUs on billing or, law there. It's on the law and what I think is it IDEA.
Yep.
The disabilities law, what it entails.
Yep.
I think when you come back to your country, you also have to find some level of understanding of what are the laws, what are the policies that are available, and the different cultures. Because I think the biggest one is culture. Because just in Botswana, 2 million people, there's 33 distinct languages that are spoken in Botswana.
33 languages.
Well, there's 2 official languages, but 33 distinct languages, I think the last time I checked. And some of the languages might be spoken by 20 or 30 people, but it's complete language. Because we have nomads, we have the Basara they are nomads who live in the desert. So there might be that small little group of people who speak that language.
Yeah.
And so with language comes cultural intricacies, and different social skills that you have to be aware of. It's funny how people would always go on and on about eye contact. Like you have to teach eye contact. And there's this obsession in the West about teaching eye contact. And I can barely get like proper eye contact. I think when we were Zooming, I don't know if you noticed, like I would look at you, but I really wouldn't look at you that much because it's disrespectful to give full-on eye contact. Yeah.
So if anything, you're teaching kids not to make eye contact.
Well, you're teaching them to give a certain level of eye contact. Like,
right.
Just that little flicker is enough. It's okay.
Yeah.
I grew up when I looked at an adult straight in the face, I would get screamed at because I'm being sassy. I'm being impolite,
The second secret word is goats.
So
do adults look at each other straight in the face, or was that just a child-adult dynamic?
I've kind of observed adults, and they do, but when they're peers, like when they're kind of in the same age range, they do kind of give each other, like traditionally, they do give each other like full-on eye contact. But when I talk to somebody who's older than me, it's sometimes a bit of a struggle to kind of look them straight in the eye because I feel like I'm being rude and disrespectful. It's how the culture is. It's those little cultural things that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is interesting. I think it's awesome that over here in North America, we're starting to, do more learning around, cultural sensitivity and cultural humility and sort of those sorts of pieces. But, I think folks would be surprised to realize how much of that training you even need in Botswana with 33 languages and so many different kinds of folks.
Yeah. It's funny, like as we're talking right now, I remember one of the, I'll say RBTs in a school in Ireland was once upset with me because I wasn't giving her eye contact. And she was like, why aren't you looking me in the eye? And I'm like, I was trying to explain to her, because I feel it's rude. And she's like, no, if you don't look me in the eye, it's actually rude. It's like you're being deceitful. You're hiding something. It was hard. It was a bit of a struggle because it was something that I actually then realized that it was something that socially I had grown up kind of learning. And then there, she was kind of teaching me that you have to give eye contact. It's important you give eye contact because this is how we view it. Right.
I wanted to kind of go back to a comment you made a couple times around code switching. This is a term that is new to me. I mean, I've been hearing a lot about it, over here as it relates to the Black Lives Matter and racism and sort of those pieces, and how folks kind of have to and forgive me if I'm butchering this, but essentially Black folk have to sort of do this code switching where they essentially change how they interact with white folk or other folk versus when they interact with each other. Right?
Yeah. It's colonialism, like colonialism and then apartheid. Yep. Because I grew up going to South Africa during the apartheid era.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I remember I had a little friend who was, I think, of British descent, and going to the border, and at the border we had to be in one line for Africans, and then they had to be in that. She had to, and we didn't understand. Yeah, because we were so young, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
So they had to be in their line. We had to be in our line once we crossed over to South Africa, And then being in South Africa, it was weird. We were a different type of Black because we're like not South African Black.
Okay, and what's the difference there, as far as they're concerned?
As far as they were concerned, we were from Botswana,
right?
Which was a pain for them because it was a country that was wholly Black run, and it was in the 80s. It was the fastest growing economy in the world. We had diamonds,
and we had diamonds. Oh yeah,
we have diamonds. So it was quite a successful country. Peaceful transfer of power, fair elections and everything. And they're trying to say that you can't let these people govern themselves. So we were a different type of Black in a way. My father, our family would go buy groceries in South Africa. It's 30 minutes. It's like 20 minutes to the border. And then about 45 minutes to the nearest town.
Okay.
So we'd go buy our groceries there because we're landlocked. So some things we can't find here.
Gotcha.
And we would get there and they would want my dad to go in to buy food for us, like snacks and stuff, instead of being served at the window. Yeah. And I remember my father refusing and saying, well, I'm still Black. I'm going to get served at the window, And it was very, I think they didn't like that.
So in South Africa, Blacks weren't allowed to go in the stores?
Yeah, they still had places like drinking water. There was a tap for Black people and a tap for white people.
Oh, wow.
In some restaurants you couldn't go into. Some places, like 45 an hour when you get into South Africa, you still have that where if you go in and you're Black, they make you feel like you don't belong there.
Like still today?
Still today.
Wow.
But I'm from Botswana, so I'm vocal. Yeah. My sister-in-law, my cousin's wife, is South African, and she always says, to us, being from Botswana, that you guys are different. You go into South Africa and you're just confident, and you carry a certain level of confidence and you talk to people. And if somebody does something wrong, you say it. It doesn't matter if they're, black or white, you just say it. In South Africa, there's still a little bit of fear. That is still there. That is still from the apartheid era.
Sure.
There's still a little bit of deference. Is that the word?
Yep.
Yeah. That is still kind of there. And that is why representation matters a lot. Because the more people see people who represent, who look like them, the more they're able to be more confident about who they are and what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So racism is still pretty strong there.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, Cape Town, is it 3 years ago? Even in Botswana, we still do have that, because if you go to the north of the country where there's a lot of tourism there, there's some places that I think once apartheid kind of ended, some of this white South Africans moved to Botswana because they thought everything was going to go crazy. So they moved here, and a lot of them are in the tourism business. And sometimes just me calling up and saying, hey, do you have a room? I'm driving up into, the village and I'd like, a room, or you want to do a safari. Them hearing me and my accent, there won't be a room.
They won't help you, or they
will say that there's no room there's no hotel room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, Cape Town, went there, was by the gate. I asked, can we get a reservation for breakfast? I was with my partner, who's Lebanese. And I said, I'd like to have, breakfast. Do you have a table? And they said, no, there's no table. And I said to him, you ask. We walked away, and then I said, it's only because I asked. And I said,
right.
And he's like, no, it's not. And I said, okay, let's go back. It's been a couple of minutes. Let's go back. You ask. So I stood back, and then he spoke into the intercom, and there was a table available. And we said, no, thank you, and walked away. Yeah.
Good for you. Wow.
Yeah. It's still quite prevalent. Yeah.
Is it like the US where you're actually like fearful of your lives? Like are the police, a big trouble and that sort of thing?
No, the police are mostly black.
Ah.
I know. I don't think the police are that much of a problem. It's just mere simple corruption.
Right. Simple corruption
where somebody asks for a bribe here and there.
Right.
But it's never really race related. I'm not going to speak for. There is some, pushback for the apartheid years. I think sometimes where somebody, mistreats somebody because of their skin color, because of the apartheid. You sometimes do hear that, but it's not it's not something that is very, very common. Crime in South Africa is it's an economic thing. It's not a race thing.
Gotcha. So you're not fearful for your life walking down the street.
Oh, in South Africa, yeah, you are, because of
you
crime. Are? Yeah.
Just because of good old crime. It's got nothing to do with racism, though.
It's just
I see.
good
Gotcha.
old crime. It's not racism. It's just yeah. Nowadays, it's both races will matter you. It's pretty much
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it used to be that they would murder you, but nowadays the house breakings, they've realized that if we murder you, we can't come, they're investing, they're saying that they're investing in the future. So they don't murder you. They let you live because they know they can always come back and after 6 months and you would have bought new stuff.
Another gap.
Yeah. Earlier on, we spoke about that in Southern Africa, they have this thing where people are certified because people come in from different countries.
Right.
Yeah, and they give talks and they certify you in different things, whereas they're not really qualified to be doing that, which is, I think we spoke about that earlier on, yeah.
And then you were talking about the whole sort of BQA?
Yeah, Botswana Quality Assurance. So in order for me to teach the RBT courses in Botswana, to certify people outside of, whatever organization that I'm working with, or I need to be BQA accredited. And the RBT course has to go through it's a pretty rigorous process of being certified and accredited as a course, being trained by professionals who are experts within the field that they are teaching that particular course. Yeah.
And why is that needed?
Well, it's needed because we were getting people from mostly, the West who are coming in, even, from Asia who are coming in and teaching things and saying, I'm the expert in ABC, taking advantage of the colonialism and coming and teaching something that they were not experts in, nor do they hold any qualification in, and teaching that particular thing. And then, charging people exorbitant amount of money. So, for instance, if I were to do an RBT course and it was somebody coming in from, the US or whatever, it might end up being about $1,000 for the 5-day, training,
Yeah.
Which is quite a lot of money here, but people do pay for it, will pay for it, but it is a lot of money that somebody is just going to throw on a course that somebody is actually not an expert in, So they're trying to make sure that there is a body that certifies and makes sure that whoever comes to do a training is certified in whatever it is that they are going to be training, and that the course material has been vetted to make sure that it's quality training. And there is one in the whole of Southern Africa. We have an organization called Southern African Development Community, SADC.
Okay.
And SADC is about 11 countries. And each of those countries has its own qualification authority that vets people and makes sure that their qualifications are what they say they are.
And so with the colonialism piece, so is that just an issue in South Africa, or is that something everywhere? The third secret word is culture.
I think it's Africa wide, but it is a huge issue in Southern Africa. In Botswana, somebody could come who's British or, white South African, who can come to Botswana and say, I'm a BCBA. And nobody will check their credentials, but they'll go to them instead of me because of the privilege, It is an issue that,
Yeah. And so that's part of the reason why you're working towards accreditation and all these other policy changes to sort of regulate that a bit better.
Yeah, it helps to regulate that a bit better. It makes sure that our parents aren't cheated, because I feel a parent paying $3,000 to $6,000 a month in Africa is just anywhere actually is ridiculous. I couldn't afford it. I don't know if you could afford paying $3,000 to $6,000 a month.
No, of course not.
For ABA services, early intervention, that might last a year or 10 years.
No, I mean, yeah.
It's unaffordable, yeah. And a lot of people mortgage their houses and everything in order to pay that for their child, because their motivation for them is that they just want their child to have a better life,
Sure.
So it's actually, it's very difficult as a professional here for me. I find myself sometimes, I've had to hire somebody else to do all of my billing because I literally find it almost impossible to put a charge on my service, knowing what it means to that family.
So are you making a living?
Barely.
Yeah.
Yeah, barely. I mean, there's only so few families that can afford the services.
Yeah.
So most of the money that I do make is if government calls me in for a training, and those are far between, So it's tough. It's tough. I could throw in the towel and move to the US tomorrow, but my motivation here is I went to school in order to come and help my country.
That's awesome.
I mean, I'm not married. I don't have kids, And so my motivation is purely to help. I do a lot of voluntary work, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Like, it's building a whole profession.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and are you, and like, am I right that you're maybe the first BCBA in Africa? Is that correct, or?
You see, I'm not 100% sure because I think there was somebody in Nigeria, but I don't know if they were in Nigeria. But I remember a friend of mine sending me a message and saying I just attended a talk several years ago, and she said the only BCBA that was that was shown in Africa was me in Botswana. Yeah, so, and that was really funny. Yeah.
And has that changed? Are there more now?
I think there could be maybe it's under 20, 10 or so, for a population of over 300 million. Wait, yeah, 300 to 400, million.
There's maybe 10 BCBAs in all of Africa. Wow.
Yeah.
And so do you have any interns right now that you're sort of supervising, or?
I do. I have about 5 people that I'm supervising. And I've also applied to, the SABA grant to train more people in the certification of ABA, so that when I go to the authorities, I can justify it by saying, here are people that I trained. This is and use the data to show them that it is a science that is quite rigorous and also effective and shows results. So I've applied for that. Also, there's the project that I did in the pilot project that, I think we had the little ones, the young kids, we had about, in the program, there was 12 children in the program, and they were receiving an hour of one-to-one a day. So far, I think 4 of them, of the 12, are in special needs schools and have transitioned into regular classrooms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing for just an hour a day.
It is pretty amazing. And for me, it was sort of wow, anything matters. But any little thing, any little amount of, ABA services matters. It makes a difference. I mean, it might have taken 2 years to get them to that level, but it matters. And also, when we started off, it was quite rigorous, making sure that people in the classrooms did, skills assessments, and then, their IEPs were in line with the VB map. The school is not an ABA school, but they are using quite a lot of, the trainings that I did when I was there, operationally defining and then taking data and then, making sure that data is, that they were able to analyze and make changes according to what the data says. So it shows that there is a lot of, usefulness for ABA, but I wanted a more controlled study with proper certification, with the, RBT certification that shows that this can work within the Botswana context. Yeah.
Totally. And are you looking to maybe do some of that research?
Yes. I'm getting help from Lukia Sami.
Yes.
She's amazing. University of Houston, Clear Lake or Clearwater.
Yep.
Yeah. She's helping me with writing up, and we've written up the proposal and we sent it to the BCBA board, and we're hoping that get just a little bit of funding that is just to fund the actual training. So it'll be 5-day RBT training that I'll donate my time to do for teachers, special education unit. So teachers and assistant teachers. So about 5. And then also a speech therapist, occupational therapist, and 2 educational psychologists and a parent. So that those 10 people, they go through the ABA training, and then we do BST with them. We went around saying, what exactly are we going to teach? Because she said, when you get professionals, sometimes when they get stuck, they go back to the initial training and they draw from there. And then it just doesn't go very well. So we chose functional communication training or MANS training.
Yeah, so that's cool that you're doing some work with Lukia and try to kind of build capacity in Botswana, and really kind of pushing forward on that piece, which is awesome.
Yeah, that would be awesome to just kind of first present information to Ministry of Health and Education to say, here's ABA, here's this is 6 months, this is what we've gotten for our students. We would like to get it accredited and have evidence, to show its efficacy. But that would be really great. I mean, there's students who've done masters in special education and counseling psychology who don't have jobs. And if we can have, because it'll be Botswana 5-course sequence, and we could get some funding or something where we have BCBAs in the US who supervise them. We get funding from government to pay for the supervision as they're working with kids, that would be awesome. So that then they're certified at a master's level, and then train at all levels. You can train at the RBT level, and then those with degrees, we can train them to be assistant behavior analysts, and then have those with masters to be trained as behavior analysts and PhDs. Yeah.
And so, are you looking to develop like an actual course sequence in Botswana, or are you just having folks do online programs or whatever?
I'm looking to develop a course sequence in Botswana, and I'd love to partner up with online programs, because the government used to be able to sponsor and send somebody to the US. But now, because of money constraints, they would rather pay for somebody, if there was an institute in Botswana that is offering that they would rather pay for that person while they're in Botswana to do, that training. So I'd love to collaborate with a university or something to bring a BCABA and a BCBA course sequence to Botswana. And Botswana is, like, a lot of people from Africa trust Botswana. They want to come to Botswana because it's a lot safer than most parts of Africa, and it's a lot more comfortable. And hey, I'm hopefully getting, I had the guys come in today. The guys were coming in today to get fiber internet.
Ooh.
And they're trying to get it across Botswana. That's one of the, so it's going to be a lot more easier to be able to have people who do the course sequence in there, to do the teaching sequence in the US, and are able to do it. So that's my dream, to just get ABA throughout Botswana.
Totally, yeah. And I presume you have universities in Botswana where you could potentially do that?
Yes, we do have universities in Botswana where we could potentially do that. But I've worked for myself so long that I'd just like to do an institute, create an institute.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's always that, like, if you go into a bigger university that's more established, what you then get there is the bureaucracy, the fighting, the big heads fighting with each other and all of that. So I'd rather partner with a newer university and kind of start things that way, with collaboration with a university in the US. That would be my dream.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's funding right now through government to actually set an institute up.
So I suppose if you're going for eventually your own national accreditation, that would be eventually it would be separate from the BACB, because they don't want to coordinate that. You wouldn't necessarily have to use the same verified course sequence, would you?
Not necessarily, but it's like I would definitely have to add in 1 or 2 different extra courses. But I would want to use the BCBA course sequence so that it's already developed.
Right.
We already have people on the ground who have some level of training. And like how there was a time where there was a lot of onboarding of different professionals into ABA. So there was a 5-course sequence, and then then we moved to it being a master's, and then BCABAs could have a degree in certain courses, and then eventually they had to have their degree in ABA. So I'd like something like that, where we set like a 3-year process of trying to onboard people into a certification program with proper supervision and everything, and then start having a master's and a degree in ABA. And they have different certification according to the level of their training.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's the potential here to once you start building capacity in Botswana, which I think is your goal here, is just to sort of make it so you don't have to do everything. There might be some potential to maybe even replicate this in other African countries even?
Yes, because of the Southern African Development Community, SADC. Once I developed the institute in Botswana, and it is verified and it has some level of integrity because of association with the BCBA, then what can happen is once it's accredited in Botswana, it's easy to accredit it in Namibia and South Africa and 11 countries in Southern Africa and beyond that. So starting up a program in Botswana, it's actually pretty nice because you can set it up in Botswana and then Botswana could be your satellite, and then you start up others outside of Botswana easier because the laws in Botswana are a lot easier and the taxes are easier and all of that good stuff.
If you get your fancy fiber optic network, then you can start to do things via telehealth too, I suppose.
Yes, which is really awesome. And then also, in Botswana, you could be in the city and an hour and a half flight, and you're in the north where traffic jams are because elephants are crossing the road. And not really wild elephants too, not like
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's really cool. You're just doing so many really cool things and kind of, essentially a pioneer over there in the work you're doing. And I'm so, it's amazing all the stuff you're doing, but I think what's most amazing is that you've had opportunities to kind of go back to America and work. Lots of people want you, and you could probably even go back to Ireland or any of those countries if you wanted, but that you want to sort of push forward and develop this in your own country. And I think that's just so awesome and so cool. I guess I was wondering, actually, from when we were talking earlier, does it help that you know the president? Well, have you made that call? Have you played the president card yet?
Have I pulled those strings?
Maybe I think at this point might be a good time to wrap it up as the African internet system fails.
No, it's the Canadian. Mine has been consistent.
Oh, okay. Here we go. This is my issue.
I lived in the US. I can say a boot.
Yeah. So funny. Yeah. It's really been a pleasure chatting with you. And I definitely want to do this again when you have better internet.
Yeah.
And I have better internet. I'm hoping to get some fiber optics one day on good old Texada Island too. But yeah, it's just been really cool to kind of hear your perspective, not only on all the cool things you're doing in Botswana and in Africa, but your journey around the world and your experiences, sort of switching from culture to culture and really being able to sort of adapt to each culture and change your behavior. I mean, you've got so much cool stuff to share. Yeah, I just think it's all really amazing and really impressive. And so I'm looking forward to kind of following your work and watching the development and watching kind of how things grow over there over the next few years. Just really impressive. And I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.